4 years ago, my wife walked out on me, calling my dreams too small and choosing a CEO's penthouse over our marriage. Last Tuesday, she applied for a job at my company. When she walked into that conference room and saw me sitting behind the CEO's desk, her face went completely white. The interview that followed, well, let's just say it was the most satisfying 4 minutes of my entire life. The smell of Chinese takeout still lingered in our kitchen when I walked through the front door that Tuesday night. I'd grabbed dinner on the way home from another 16-hour day at the startup, excited to tell Victoria about the breakthrough I'd finally achieved with my AI platform. After 18 months of debugging and refining, the customer service automation was actually working better than I'd dreamed. "Victoria?" I called out, setting the food containers on our kitchen counter. "Wait until you hear what happened today. The response time metrics are incredible." Silence. I found her in our living room and immediately knew something was catastrophically wrong. 2 matching suitcases sat by the front door, expensive Louis Vuitton luggage I'd never seen before. Victoria stood beside our coffee table, wearing a black dress that cost more than my monthly salary, her hair styled like she was heading to some corporate gala. In her perfectly manicured hands, she held a thick manila envelope. "Leo, sit down." Her voice carried a tone I'd never heard before, cold, rehearsed, like she'd practiced this moment in front of a mirror. "What's going on? Are we going somewhere?" I gestured toward the suitcases, confusion mixing with the first tendrils of dread. She opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of legal documents. "These are divorce papers. I've already signed them. You just need to add your signature on the highlighted line." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually took a step backward, nearly stumbling over our cat Pixel, who'd wandered into the room. "Divorce papers? Victoria, what are you talking about? We just celebrated our 4th anniversary last month. You said you loved me. I did love you, Leo. Or I loved the version of you I thought would eventually grow up." She set the papers on the coffee table with the same casual indifference she'd used to set down a grocery list. "But I'm 29 years old, and I'm tired of pretending that your little coding projects are going to change our lives." Little coding projects. The phrase felt like acid in my throat. "Victoria, this AI platform could revolutionize customer service automation. The beta testing results are beyond anything I imagined. Companies are going to save millions in operational costs while providing better customer experiences. This isn't some hobby, this could be huge." She laughed, and the sound was sharp enough to cut glass. "Could be huge, might be successful. Always someday, never today. Do you know what Marcus Whitmore closed today? A $50 million acquisition deal. Real money, Leo, not potential money, not maybe money. Actual success." Marcus Whitmore, the CEO she'd been mentioning more and more frequently over the past few months. The man whose networking events she'd been attending, whose business philosophy she'd been quoting at dinner. "Marcus offered me something real," she continued, her voice gaining strength like she was feeding off my shock. "A penthouse downtown with a view of the harbor. European vacations to places I've only seen in magazines. A life where I don't have to worry about whether the electricity bill will clear before payday." I stared at her, this woman I'd shared a bed with for 4 years, and realized I was looking at a complete stranger. "So you're leaving me for his money?" "I'm leaving you because he has vision beyond a computer screen in our spare bedroom. Because he understands that success means building empires, not just writing code that might work someday. I can't waste any more years watching you dream small while other men are actually changing the world." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. Dream small. The woman who used to bring me coffee during late-night coding sessions, who once said my passion for technology was one of the things she loved most about me, had just reduced everything I was working toward as dreaming small. Victoria picked up her suitcases with the confidence of someone who'd already mentally checked out of our marriage. "The Mercedes outside is waiting for me. I'll send someone for the rest of my things next week." She walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at me one last time. "I hope you understand this isn't personal, Leo. It's just business. And your business isn't big enough for the life I want." The front door closed with a soft click, leaving me alone with divorce papers, cold Chinese food, and the devastating realization that the person I'd trusted most in the world had just called my dreams worthless. I didn't chase her. Every instinct screamed at me, to run after that Mercedes, to pound on the window to demand she explain how 4 years of marriage could dissolve into a business transaction. But I stood frozen in our doorway, watching the red taillights disappear around the corner, still clutching those divorce papers like they might somehow change if I held them tight enough. The silence that followed was deafening. Our house had never felt this empty, even during the weeks when Victoria traveled for work. This wasn't temporary absence. This was abandonment. The walls seemed to echo with the ghost of her parting words. "Your business isn't big enough for the life I want." I walked back inside and closed the door with deliberate calm, the same way I'd close a file on my computer when the code wasn't working. Methodical, controlled, logical. But my hands were shaking as I set the papers on our kitchen counter next to the Chinese takeout that was already growing cold. Pixel rubbed against my legs. Sensing something was wrong, I picked him up, and for a moment, his familiar purr was the only sound keeping me tethered to reality. At least someone in this house still wanted me around. The emotional storm was building inside my chest like pressure in a sealed container. Victoria's words kept replaying in an endless loop. Little coding projects. Dream small. Other men are building empires. Each phrase hit like a physical blow, but I refused to let myself break down. Not yet. I opened the Chinese food containers with mechanical precision and forced myself to eat. Though everything tasted like cardboard, the routine felt important. Eating dinner, feeding Pixel, maintaining some semblance of normalcy while my world crumbled around me. If I could just keep moving, keep functioning, maybe the pain wouldn't catch up to me. But sitting at our kitchen table, looking at Victoria's empty chair, the memories ambushed me. 2 years ago, she'd sat in that exact spot, eyes bright with excitement, as I explained how my AI platform could transform customer service. "You're going to change everything, Leo," she'd said, reaching across to squeeze my hand. "I believe in you." What happened to that woman? When did belief turn into mockery? When did my passion become an embarrassment to her? I walked to my home office, the spare bedroom Victoria had started calling Leo's cave with increasing disdain over the past few months. My computer setup looked exactly as I'd left it that morning. 3 monitors displaying lines of code that represented 18 months of work, coffee-stained notebooks filled with algorithms and breakthrough moments, and a whiteboard covered in diagrams that made perfect sense to me but probably looked like chaos to everyone else. This was what she called dreaming small. This AI platform that could process customer inquiries with unprecedented accuracy, that could save companies millions while improving customer satisfaction, that had already attracted interest from 2 potential investors. Small dream. I sat down at my keyboard, but the code on the screen blurred as the reality hit me in waves. The woman I'd shared my bed with, my hopes with, my future with, had just reduced everything I was working toward as worthless. Not only that, she'd been planning this exit strategy while I'd been pouring my heart out about breakthrough moments and beta testing results. The humiliation burned worse than the abandonment. How many times had I excitedly shared progress updates with her over dinner, not realizing she was already mentally calculating her escape route? How many late nights had I spent coding while she was probably texting Marcus about penthouse apartments and European vacation? But underneath the pain and humiliation, something else was stirring, something quiet but powerful. Victoria wanted to see what dreaming big looked like. She wanted empires instead of potential. Fine. I cracked my knuckles, opened a new document and began typing. If she thought my dreams were small, maybe it was time to show her just how wrong she was. The code on my screen wasn't just lines of programming anymore. It was the foundation of everything I was about to build. Victoria had made one critical error in her calculation. She'd underestimated exactly how determined a man could become when the person he loved most called his life's work worthless. The signs had been there for months, and I'd been too buried in code to see them clearly. Sitting in my office that night, staring at the divorce papers, the memories came flooding back with brutal clarity. It started 6 months ago, on a Thursday evening in March. I'd rushed home from the startup office, practically bouncing with excitement, carrying Chinese takeout and a bottle of champagne I'd splurged on despite our tight budget. After weeks of debugging and optimization, my AI platform had finally achieved something remarkable. A 97% accuracy rate in understanding complex customer inquiries compared to the industry standard of 73%. I'd called out, bursting through the front door like a kid on Christmas morning. "You're not going to believe what happened today. The sentiment analysis breakthrough I've been working on actually worked. We're talking about technology that could save companies millions while making customers happier." I found her in our bedroom, applying makeup with the precision of an artist, preparing for a gallery opening. She was wearing a black cocktail dress I'd never seen before, something that looked like it cost more than our monthly grocery budget. "That's wonderful, honey," she'd said, barely glancing at me in the mirror, "but I need to leave in 20 minutes. Marcus is hosting a networking event at the Fairmont, and these are the kind of connections that actually matter in business." The deflation was instant. I'd set the champagne on our dresser, suddenly feeling foolish. I thought we could celebrate together. This could be the breakthrough that changes everything for us. Victoria had paused, lipstick halfway to her mouth, and looked at me with something that might have been pity. "Leo, do you know what Marcus accomplished today? He closed a $50 million acquisition deal. $50 million. Real money, not theoretical money based on accuracy percentages and beta testing." She'd turned back to the mirror, adding another coat of mascara. "I love that you're passionate about your work, but we need to be realistic about what actually pays the bill." That should have been my first real warning, but I dismissed it as stress from her demanding marketing job. Victoria had always been ambitious. It was one of the things I'd fallen in love with, but somewhere along the way, her ambition had shifted from supporting our dreams to comparing them unfavorably to other people's realities. The pattern became clearer as the weeks passed. Expensive gifts started appearing, designer handbags, jewelry, shoes that cost more than my monthly car payment. When I asked about them, Victoria would wave dismissively and mention work bonuses or networking investment. She started following luxury lifestyle Instagram accounts, spending hours scrolling through posts about CEO wives and their European vacations. The conversations around our dinner table began changing too. Where we used to talk about our future plans, our shared goals, Victoria started dropping Marcus's name with increasing frequency. "Marcus says the key to real success is thinking bigger than your current circumstance. Marcus believes that if you're not scaling rapidly, you're essentially moving backward. Marcus thinks most entrepreneurs fail because they're too attached to small ideas." I'd tried to engage, to share my own business insights, but Victoria would listen with the polite attention you'd give a child explaining their imaginary friend. The woman who once stayed up late helping me brainstorm solutions to coding problems started checking her phone whenever I mentioned work. The breaking point should have been 3 weeks ago, when Victoria came home glowing from another networking event. She'd spent 20 minutes describing Marcus's ex-wife's new house in Malibu, a 5-bedroom mansion with ocean views that he'd bought her just to keep things civil during the divorce. "Can you imagine having that kind of resources?" Victoria had said, her eyes distant and dreamy. "Being able to solve problems with generosity instead of struggling over every decision. That's real power, Leo. That's what success actually looks like." I'd been debugging a particularly stubborn algorithm that night, exhausted after a 14-hour day, and I'd mumbled something about how meaningful work was more important than mansions. Victoria had gone quiet, and I thought she'd agreed with me. Now I realized she'd been calculating. While I was building something that could genuinely help people, Victoria was measuring the distance between our modest apartment and Marcus's world of effortless luxury. She wasn't seeing a husband pursuing his passion. She was seeing a man whose dreams weren't big enough for her evolving appetites. The cruelest irony was that she'd fallen in love with my dedication and vision, then left me for lacking the very ambition she'd once admired. But she'd never understood that real dreams aren't measured by their immediate size, they're measured by their potential to grow. 2 weeks after Victoria left, I was finally ready to face the practical aftermath of her departure. The divorce papers sat on my kitchen counter like a ticking bomb. But first I needed to untangle our shared digital life, bank accounts, subscriptions, and the laptop we both used for personal stuff. The MacBook Pro had been Victoria's idea, purchased last year when she said we needed something more professional for our future business endeavors. I'd mainly used it for backing up my development work and the occasional Netflix binge. Victoria used it for everything: social media, online shopping, and what she called career development research. I was cleaning out old files, preparing to transfer anything important before wiping it clean, when I found a folder buried deep in the directory structure. It was labeled VM, Personal Projects, with a creation date from 8 months ago. Victoria had always been meticulous about organizing her files, but this folder was hidden in a location most people would never find. My cursor hovered over it for a moment. Part of me knew I shouldn't look. Our marriage was over, and Victoria's privacy should remain intact even after her betrayal. But something about the timing nagged at me. 8 months ago was right around when she'd started attending Marcus's networking events. I opened the folder. The first thing I saw were screenshots. Dozens of them. Luxury apartment listings in downtown high-rises, all with rent prices that made my stomach drop. Penthouse views, marble countertops, walk-in closets bigger than our current bedroom. Each screenshot was dated and organized into subfolders. Harbor View properties, executive living options, furnished versus unfurnished. But that was just the beginning. There was a document titled Legal Research, Divorce Considerations, with bookmarked articles about asset division, spousal support, and something that made my blood run cold: protecting intellectual property rights during dissolution. Victoria had researched whether she could claim ownership of work I'd developed during our marriage. My hands were shaking as I clicked on the next folder. Communications. Email screenshots. Dozens of them. Conversations between Victoria and Marcus, dating back 8 months. Carefully documented and saved like evidence in a court case. I scrolled through them with growing horror, watching my marriage decompose in real time. The earliest emails were flirtatious, but relatively innocent. Marcus complimenting Victoria's business acumen and refreshing perspective on market dynamics. Victoria responding with increasing familiarity, sharing details about her frustrations with limited thinking in my personal life. But by month 3, the tone had shifted dramatically. Marcus, your husband's little AI project sounds intriguing. Any chance you could share some technical details? I'm always looking for emerging opportunities. Victoria, Leo's very secretive about his work, but I've picked up enough to know it's some kind of customer service automation. He thinks it's revolutionary, but honestly, how different can it really be from existing chatbot technology? Marcus, innovation often comes from people who don't realize they're not the first to have an idea. Still, if he's generating investor interest, there might be something worth examining. The next email made me physically sick. Victoria, I've been thinking about what you said regarding strategic information sharing. Leo keeps all his important files on our shared drive. He trusts me completely, probably too much. If I happen to access some project details, hypothetically, how would someone evaluate whether there's real value there? Marcus, hypothetically, I'd need to see technical specifications, market analysis, and investor correspondence to make any meaningful assessment. But of course, we're just speaking theoretically about general business principles. The final email in the chain was dated 3 days before Victoria left me. Victoria, everything you requested is in the attached file. Leo's project notes, his investor pitch deck, even some source code samples. I'm attaching everything to this email. As we discussed, once I make this transition, I'll need assurance that my new lifestyle will be sustainable long-term. Marcus, you've exceeded expectations. Victoria, consider your future secured. Pack light tomorrow. We have shopping to do. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen in complete disbelief. This wasn't just adultery or even abandonment. It was corporate espionage. Victoria hadn't just left me for Marcus. She'd sold my life's work to buy her way into his world. She'd spent months methodically documenting our relationship's deterioration while simultaneously stealing everything I'd worked for. The woman who'd once brought me coffee during late coding sessions had been photographing my whiteboard sketches and copying my files. The woman who called my dreams small had been planning to sell them to the highest bidder. I printed every email, every screenshot, every document. My hands were steady now, my mind crystal clear. Victoria had made a critical error in her calculations. She'd left a complete paper trail of her betrayal, and she'd severely underestimated exactly how big my small dreams were about to become. The evidence spread across my kitchen table like pieces of a puzzle I'd never wanted to solve. printed emails, screenshots of apartment searches, and Victoria's research on intellectual property theft. During divorce proceedings, for 3 days I'd studied every document, every timestamp, every calculated move she'd made to dismantle our marriage while stealing my life's work. My first instinct was to call her, to scream, to demand explanations. My second instinct was to drive to Marcus's office and confront them both. But as I sat there staring at the proof of their betrayal, a different kind of clarity emerged. Getting angry would be satisfying for about 10 minutes. Getting strategic would be satisfying for the rest of my life. I made my first call to Sarah Chen, the intellectual property attorney, who'd helped me file my initial patents. Sarah was one of those lawyers who spoke in precise, measured sentences that made you feel like every word was being itemized on a bill. But she was ruthlessly effective. "Leo, I need you to bring me everything you have," she said after I'd explained the situation. "If what you're describing is accurate, we're not just looking at marital infidelity, we're looking at corporate espionage and intellectual property theft. This changes the entire landscape of both your divorce proceedings and your business protection strategy." My second call was to David Park, my primary investor contact. David had been cautiously interested in my AI platform for months, impressed by the technical specifications, but concerned about market positioning. I'd been planning to wait until I had more beta testing results before our next meeting. "David, I need to schedule an emergency meeting," I said, pacing around my empty living room. "There's been a security breach involving my intellectual property, and I have documentation of attempted corporate espionage. I think you need to see this before anyone else does." There was a long pause. "Leo, are you telling me someone tried to steal your technology?" "I'm telling you someone succeeded in accessing my development files, technical specifications, and investor correspondence with the intent to sell that information to a competitor. I have email evidence of the entire operation. Can you be in my office tomorrow morning at 8? My third call was the hardest one. Jake Morrison had been my best friend since college, my coding partner during late-night hackathons, and the one person who'd consistently believed in my AI platform even when I'd started doubting myself. "Jake, I need a favor. Actually, I need several favors, and they're all going to sound insane. Hit me. I need a place to crash for a few months. Victoria left me. She's been stealing my work to give to Marcus Whitmore, and I need to completely restructure my entire business approach before they realize I know what they did." Jake was quiet for a moment. "She did what? I'll explain everything when I get there. But Jake, I'm about to burn down my old life and build something completely different from the ashes. Are you in? Pack your stuff. Bring Pixel. We'll figure out the rest." The next 48 hours passed in a blur of strategic decisions. I hired Sarah to file cease and desist orders against Marcus's company, citing intellectual property theft and demanding the return of all proprietary information. I moved my development environment to a secure server, changed every password, and implemented encryption protocols that would make Fort Knox jealous. Most importantly, I restructured my entire business approach. Instead of seeking one major investor, I decided to bootstrap and retain complete control. Instead of trying to compete in Marcus's world of corporate acquisitions, I would build something he couldn't buy, steal, or replicate. Victoria called twice during those first weeks. Both times I let it go to voicemail. Her messages were identical, concerned, slightly confused, asking to talk about dividing our assets fairly. I deleted them without listening to the full recordings and forwarded her number to Sarah. Marcus's company announced their new AI initiative exactly 6 weeks after Victoria left. The press release described revolutionary customer service automation technology, using remarkably similar language to my original investor pitch. But Sarah was ready with legal documentation proving prior art, patent applications, and evidence of theft. The cease and desist letters arrived at Marcus's office the same day their press release went public. Meanwhile, I was working 18-hour days in Jake's spare bedroom, rebuilding my platform from the ground up. Every line of code was better than before, every algorithm more sophisticated. Victoria and Marcus had stolen my work, but they'd also done me an unexpected favor. They'd shown me exactly what I needed to protect and improve. 3 months after Victoria walked out with those Louis Vuitton suitcases, I incorporated Sterling Dynamics as a Delaware. I was the sole owner, the sole decision maker, and the sole beneficiary of whatever success was coming. Victoria had wanted to see what dreaming big looked like. She was about to find out. 4 years is a long time in the technology world. Long enough for dreams to become reality, for small coding projects to transform into industry-changing platforms, and for people who bet on the wrong horse to watch their carefully constructed lives crumble in spectacular fashion. Sterling Dynamics had grown beyond even my most optimistic projections. What started as late-night coding sessions in Jake's spare bedroom had evolved into a $200 million company with headquarters in downtown Seattle, 150 employees across 3 offices, and client contracts with 17 Fortune 500 companies. My AI platform wasn't just working, it was revolutionizing how businesses handled customer service, saving clients an average of $2.3 million annually while improving customer satisfaction scores by I'd been featured on the cover of Tech Innovator magazine with the headline, "The Quiet Revolutionary: How Leo Sterling Built Tomorrow's Customer Service Today." The article described my journey from small-town dreamer to Silicon Valley disruptor. Though they'd gotten the geography wrong, I'd built my empire right here in Seattle, refusing 3 separate offers to relocate to California. But the real satisfaction wasn't in the magazine covers or the company valuation. It was in watching the Karma Express arrive exactly on schedule for Victoria and Marcus. Marcus's stolen AI project had been doomed from the moment he'd tried to implement it. The code samples Victoria had provided were functional, but they were just fragments, like trying to reconstruct a symphony from a few scattered notes, without understanding the underlying architecture, the machine learning models, or the continuous refinement process I'd developed. Marcus's team had built what amounted to an expensive, glorified chatbot. The first major client deployment had been a disaster. The system couldn't handle complex inquiries, frequently provided incorrect responses, and crashed during peak usage periods. Marcus's company faced a class action lawsuit from 3 corporate clients who'd suffered significant losses due to system failure. The legal fees alone had cost them $12 million. But Marcus's real downfall came from his fundamental misunderstanding of how innovation actually worked. He'd assumed that stealing my initial code was like stealing a finished product, not realizing that successful AI platforms require constant iteration, learning, and improvement. While his team struggled with a static, broken system, I'd been continuously evolving my platform based on real-world usage data from dozens of successful implementations. Within 18 months of launching his revolutionary AI system, Marcus had burned through $40 million in investor funding with nothing to show for it, except angry clients and a reputation for overpromising and under-delivering. His company's stock had dropped 67%, and 2 board members had called for his resignation. The business publications that had once celebrated Marcus as a visionary acquisition strategist began running articles with titles like "When Big Dreams Meet Small Results," "The Marcus Whitmore Cautionary Tale," and "How Hubris Destroyed a Tech Empire." The man who'd once mocked my small dreams was now desperately seeking bridge loans to keep his company solvent. Victoria's trajectory had been even more brutal to watch, mainly because it was so predictable. Her penthouse lifestyle had lasted exactly as long as Marcus's success. When his company started hemorrhaging money and facing lawsuits, the expensive gifts stopped appearing. The European vacations got canceled. The designer shopping sprees became memory exercises in fiscal responsibility. I'd heard through mutual friends that Marcus had grown increasingly bitter about his failures, and he'd started blaming Victoria for providing inadequate intelligence about my technology. Their relationship, built on mutual opportunism rather than genuine connection, couldn't survive the pressure of shared failure. Marcus had abandoned Victoria with the same cold efficiency she'd once used to leave me. No dramatic confrontation, no explanation, just a brief text message informing her that their arrangement was concluded, and she had 30 days to find alternative living situations. Victoria's LinkedIn profile told the rest of the story in painful detail. After being cast out of Marcus's world, she'd struggled to find steady employment. Her resume showed a series of increasingly desperate positions. short-term marketing contracts, consulting gigs that lasted weeks instead of months, and eventually entry-level positions that paid less than what she'd been earning when we were married. Her social media presence, once filled with photos of luxury experiences and business networking events, had gone quiet. The last post I'd seen was from 8 months ago, a generic motivational quote about new beginnings and learning from challenge. Meanwhile, I'd been building relationships with clients who valued innovation over acquisition, investors who understood long-term vision over quarterly profits, and employees who shared my belief that technology should solve real problems for real people. The morning I received Victoria's job application at Sterling Dynamics, I was reviewing quarterly reports that showed 47% year-over-year growth and client satisfaction scores that exceeded industry benchmarks by margins our competitors couldn't even understand, let alone replicate. Her resume landed in my executive assistant's inbox like a message from a completely different lifetime. Victoria Sterling, seeking a senior marketing manager position at the company built on the dreams she'd once called small. The irony was so perfect it felt scripted. The woman who'd left me because my business wasn't big enough for the life she wanted, was now applying to work for that same business, which had become exactly as big as I'd always known it could be. 4 years ago, Victoria had calculated that Marcus's established success was a safer bet than my unrealized potential. She'd chosen immediate gratification over long-term partnership, luxury over loyalty, and appearance over substance. Now she was about to discover exactly how expensive those calculations had been. The email notification appeared on my phone during my morning run along Lake Washington. Sarah Martinez, my executive assistant, had flagged it as urgent. Unusual application requiring CEO review. I'd built Sterling Dynamics with a flat organizational structure where department heads made their own hiring decisions, so applications rarely reached my desk unless something was genuinely extraordinary. I finished my 5-mile loop, showered and settled into my corner office on the 32nd floor of Columbia Center with my usual black coffee and Monday morning routine. Seattle stretched out below me through floor-to-ceiling windows, the harbor where Victoria had once dreamed of penthouse views, the downtown core where Marcus's company had once occupied 3 floors before downsizing to a single shared workspace. I opened the application file, and Victoria's name hit me like a physical blow. Victoria Sterling, the woman who'd walked out of our modest apartment 4 years ago carrying Louis Vuitton luggage and calling my dreams small. Her professional headshot showed an older version of the woman I'd once loved, tired eyes behind a practiced smile, the confident arrogance replaced with something that looked like desperate hope. Her resume read like a cautionary tale written in reverse chronological order. Current position, freelance marketing consultant, which I recognized as LinkedIn code for unemployed. Previous role, senior marketing coordinator at a mid-tier agency lasting 7 months. Before that, a series of increasingly short-term positions, each one representing a step down from the last. But it was her cover letter that made me set down my coffee cup and lean back in my leather chair. Dear hiring manager, it began, I am excited to apply for the senior marketing manager position at Sterling Dynamics. Your company's innovative approach to AI-driven customer service represents exactly the kind of forward-thinking technology I'm passionate about supporting. Forward-thinking technology, the same technology she'd once dismissed as little coding projects while stealing my files to give to Marcus. Throughout my career, I've specialized in translating complex technical concepts into compelling marketing narratives that drive business growth. I believe my experience working with cutting-edge AI platforms would bring immediate value to your team. I had to admire the audacity. Victoria was applying for a job at my company by claiming expertise in the exact technology she'd tried to sabotage. I buzzed Sarah. Cancel my 10 o'clock meeting. I'm conducting an interview personally. Sir? But you don't usually make an exception. Victoria Sterling, interview for senior marketing manager. Schedule her for this afternoon at 2. Conference room. I spent the rest of the morning reviewing Victoria's application materials and preparing for a conversation I'd been unconsciously rehearsing for 4 years. By lunch, I'd made my decision about how this interview would proceed. At exactly 2 o'clock, Sarah escorted Victoria into the conference room. I was already seated at the head of the polished oak table wearing my favorite navy suit, the one I'd worn for the Tech Innovator magazine cover shoot. Victoria entered wearing a conservative black dress that looked professional but inexpensive, her designer handbag replaced with something practical from Target. The moment she saw me, her face went completely white. She actually gripped the doorframe for support, and I thought she might turn around and flee, but Victoria had always been resilient in her own way, and after a moment of shock, she straightened her shoulders and walked to the chair across from me. "Hello, Victoria. Please have a seat." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "Leo, I didn't realize you were the CEO." "Yes, well, 4 years can change a lot of things." I gestured around the conference room with its view of Elliott Bay. Turns out, those small dreams had bigger potential than some people calculated. Victoria sat down carefully, her hands folded in her lap like a child called to the principal's office. The confident woman who'd once lectured me about real success and thinking bigger looked smaller, somehow diminished by the weight of her own choices. "I prepared some questions about your experience with AI technology platforms," I said, opening her resume file. "According to your cover letter, you have extensive experience in this field. Can you walk me through your background with customer service automation systems?" Victoria's mouth opened and closed without sound. We both knew she had no real experience with AI technology beyond whatever superficial knowledge she'd gleaned from stealing my work 4 years ago. I worked closely with developers on implementation strategies. Which developers? Which specific platform? What were the performance metrics? The questions came in measured succession, each one exposing another layer of her fabricated expertise. Victoria stammered through increasingly vague responses, her professional facade cracking with each failed answer. After 10 minutes of painful evasion, I leaned forward. "Victoria, let me ask you something more personal. What happened with Marcus Whitmore's AI initiative? I seem to remember reading about some significant challenges with that project." The question landed like a sledgehammer. Victoria's composure finally shattered completely, and tears began streaming down her cheeks. "Leo, please. I know I don't deserve this job. I know I don't deserve anything from you. I made the worst mistake of my life when I left you. I was young and stupid, and I threw away something real for something that looked shinier, but turned out to be completely hollow." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, smearing her carefully applied makeup. "Marcus dumped me the moment his company started failing. He blamed me for not providing better intelligence about your technology. He said I was worthless without insider information to trade." I sat quietly, watching the woman who'd once called my dreams inadequate completely fall apart in my conference room. I've been living in a studio apartment for 2 years, taking whatever contract work I can find. I haven't been on a vacation since Marcus kicked me out. I sold most of the jewelry and designer clothes he bought me just to pay rent. She looked up at me with red, desperate eyes. "I know you have every right to hate me, but I'm begging you. Please give me a chance to prove I can contribute something meaningful to what you've built." I stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city where I'd built my empire while she'd watched hers crumble. The silence stretched between us for nearly a minute. "Victoria," I said finally, "you once told me that my business wasn't big enough for the life you wanted. Looking around this office, at this company, at what became of those small dreams you mocked, what would you say?" Her voice was barely audible. "I'd say I was the smallest part of this whole story." I turned back to face her. "You're right, you were, and this interview is over." That evening I sat in my home office overlooking the Puget Sound, watching the sun set behind the Olympic Mountains. The house wasn't a penthouse. Victoria would probably call it modest, but it was mine. Every piece of furniture, every framed patent certificate on the walls, every line of code running on my servers represented something I'd built with my own hands and vision. Pixel, now 12 years old and significantly grayer around the whiskers, was curled up on his favorite spot on my desk, purring softly beside a framed photo of the Sterling Dynamics team at our last company retreat. 50 faces smiling back at the camera. All of them people who'd chosen to believe in something that once existed only in late-night coding sessions and caffeine-fueled dreams. I opened my laptop and began typing an email to the entire company. "Team, tomorrow we officially launch the Sterling Foundation Scholarship Program. This initiative will provide full college funding for 50 underprivileged students annually who demonstrate exceptional potential in AI development, computer science, and related fields. Our selection criteria won't focus on existing achievements or family connections. We're looking for raw talent, determination, and the kind of vision that others might dismiss as dreaming too small." I paused, thinking about the kid I'd been 10 years ago, staying up until 3 a.m. in my cramped apartment, convinced that I could build something that would matter. That version of me wouldn't have qualified for most traditional scholarships. His dreams would have seemed unrealistic to committees focused on safe, predictable success metrics. Remember, I continued typing, every innovation that changed the world started as someone's impossible idea. Our job isn't to judge the size of a dream when it begins. It's to provide the resources and support needed to help it grow into something extraordinary. As I wrote those words, I realized I was really writing them for the man I'd been 4 years ago, standing in an empty living room holding divorce papers, wondering if Victoria might be right about my dreams being too small for the real world. The hardest part of Victoria's betrayal hadn't been the abandonment or even the corporate espionage. It had been the moment of self-doubt she'd planted when she called my life's work little coding projects. For weeks after she left, I'd wondered if maybe she was right. Maybe I was just another delusional programmer who'd confused passion with potential. But doubt, I'd learned, was just fear wearing a business suit. Victoria had confused activity with achievement, acquisition with innovation, and size with significance. She'd measured my dreams against Marcus's established empire and found them wanting, not realizing that established empires are exactly what disruptive innovation is designed to replace. The truth was that Victoria had never understood what she was looking at when she watched me code. She saw late nights and modest paychecks where she should have seen vision and determination. She saw a man working in a spare bedroom where she should have seen an entrepreneur building tomorrow's solutions to today's problem. Marcus had made the same mistake, assuming that stealing a few code samples was equivalent to stealing innovation itself. He'd focused on the product instead of the process, the current state instead of the growth trajectory, the immediate value instead of the long-term potential. Both of them had confused the seed with the tree. I'd spent 4 years proving that dreams aren't measured by their size when you start. They're measured by your commitment to making them real. Every successful company, every breakthrough technology, every world-changing innovation began as something small that other people didn't take seriously. The scholarship program was my way of ensuring that other dreamers wouldn't have to choose between vision and validation, between innovation and immediate gratification. I wanted to find the students who were building AI platforms in their dorm rooms, the ones whose girlfriends or boyfriends might be telling them to be more realistic about their career prospects. When someone calls your dreams small, they're really revealing the limitations of their own imagination. Victoria had looked at my work and seen inadequacy where she should have seen opportunity. She'd chosen the penthouse over the process, the lifestyle over the mission, the appearance of success over the substance of achievement. As I finished the email and hit send, I felt something I hadn't experienced since the night Victoria left: complete peace. Not because I'd gotten revenge, but because I'd stayed true to my vision when abandoning it would have been easier. Not because Victoria had been humiliated, but because I'd proven that the dreams she'd mocked were worth every late night, every doubt, every moment of uncertainty. The best response to being underestimated isn't anger, it's achievement. The most powerful revenge isn't destruction, it's creation. And sometimes the greatest victory is simply becoming the person your critics said you'd never be. I closed my laptop, scratched Pixel behind the ears, and headed to bed. Tomorrow, 50 students would receive life-changing scholarships funded by dreams that someone once called too small. Sometimes strength doesn't scream. Sometimes it just builds quietly in spare bedrooms until it's big enough to change the world.